working?
Huh? Yes, I am.
Are you sure?
I can hear myself.
I can hear you. I can hear you just fine. All right, let's give Doug a round of applause.
Cool. All right, like Cassandra said, I am Dougie. First name Brian, last name Douglas, but I go by Dougie sometimes in a work relationship. So I'm actually talking about, it's weird, I use my nickname only in work in situations, but I go by my given name at home. Well, it's easier that way. It's the whole Brian Ryan thing. We have a Ryan in our, anyway. I'm here not to talk about my name, but I'm actually here to talk about serverless. I took a lot of the front end stuff because knowing Matt, who gave the keynote this morning, I knew he was going to kind of explain everything I would have explained. So all that's out. The main focus in this talk is actually going to be serverless too. So is anybody familiar with serverless? Serverless architecture as a framework as well. Cool, but before I jump into that, I'm actually going to talk about something that's more exciting, which is baseball. Any baseball fans out there? Cool. Are you obviously not Giants fans because there's a game today, right? Just kidding. Yeah, actually tickets were like really cheap today, and for some reason I'm talking about that later. All right, so baseball. Baseball organized in the States. First recorded history of baseball actually being played is 1846. Fun fact, that's like the most expensive baseball card ever. It's also the first baseball card. They used to come in cigarette boxes as well. It's actually worth $2.8 million today, which is crazy. So baseball's been around for a very long time, so keep that in your mind. Baseball today, it's organized in two different leagues. You got the National League and you have the American League. National League started in 1869. 24 years later, American League's like, hey, we want to do baseballs also. So that came along. So organized baseball, as what we know it today, kind of started around that time. In 1901, the American League and the National League came together, and they created Major League Baseball. Does that sound familiar to you guys? I know not everybody's a baseball fan in the world, not a lot of hands, so hopefully I'm not going too fast. And since there's two leagues, internal and Major League Baseball, the first interleague play in regular season for two teams from the American League and the National League did not happen until 1997. By the way, I'm not a baseball fan. I just like talking about it. And I didn't know any of these facts until I started putting this talk together. And I was actually pretty amazed because one of the actual teams that did the interleague play during a regular season game was the San Francisco Baseball Giants. So that's one of them. So nobody's a fan because no one's at the game today. So, oh well. And then as we know, and here in the Bay Area, we've got two teams, right? We got the San Francisco Giants. Actually, did anybody fly in for this conference or come out outside? Okay, very cool. So hopefully this is new to you as well. We have baseball here. So we have the Giants, which is literally just around Embarcadero off of 4th and or 2nd in that area. We have Embarcadero. We've got the AT&T Park. We've got the Giants playing there. We got the Oakland A's on the other side of the bay. Yeah, Oakland fans. Okay, I didn't ask if there's any Oakland A's fans. Well, I just assumed. So baseball actually did not come to the West Coast until the Giants came over here. Actually, until the Dodgers came over here. But then we got the Giants as well. So West Coast baseball was not a huge thing as far as Major League Baseball goes. But we did have the Pacific Coast League that started 2 years after the Major League Baseball. So Pacific Coast League, sorry, I'll get to some code eventually. Pacific Coast League started with the San Francisco Seals and the Oakland Oaks. So we've had baseball for a long time. And what I'm actually trying to get at is that people actually care about baseball outside of like this room apparently. Baseball is a big deal. And I also wanted to point out, because I thought it was really cool, Oakland Oaks, when they started, they were one of the first teams to have a colored player play organized baseball integrated. This is Jimmy Saxton. He was actually from Canada. And when they got him to play, they pretended like he was a Native American. And it only lasted for 3 games. And they figured it out. And they're like, oh, no, hold on. I know what you are. So anyway, so he only lasted 3 games. But he was the first colored baseball player in the US. So good to know. So sorry, hopefully, I know baseball is super exciting for you guys. I've kind of finished my history of baseball. And I just wanted to point out that baseball itself has a legacy. It's like a legacy system that is set up. And people care about it. And the other thing is like change is also, it's hard to do. Like we're talking about Jamstack. It's funny, like, so Matt actually talked about a lot about this, so I took all that stuff out of here. But Jamstack, it's nothing really new. It's just like it's a new spin on an old thing. So separating concerns, having a front end, back end, that's a new thing. So it's hard it's easy to resist that change, especially when you're really cool with legacies. Let's get off the baseball train and talk about the BART. Just kidding. Speaking of which, of legacy systems, BART. BART's been around since 1972. Muni's been around since 1980. They have problems. It's problematic so much that the whole reason I'm talking about baseball is because my commute from Oakland, where I live, to Dogpatch, where I go to work, it's about an hour on the train, a little over an hour. It's like 30 minutes if I drive, but where are you going to park? So I end up taking the BART and the Muni just to get to my work. Problem with that is there's 2 baseball stadiums in between my route. So my route gets really hairy when there's a home game. It's actually pretty problematic, where I actually had one question and one question only. When is baseball? If there's baseball, when do I go home? And I built an app that's called Hustlin', because I wanted to find out when I needed to start hustling to get home before the baseball game starts and ends. So I built this app, and it happened because when I'm actually from Florida, so I moved here, and I'm from a place where baseball is a thing, but no one cares about it, which I guess you guys all agree, right? Most of you. So I didn't think baseball was that big of a deal. So the very first day I got a place, it took me 2 weeks to find a place in Oakland. I got a place. I worked late that night, and I went to Target, got myself an air mattress. I got what do you call them, a blanket, and some bedding and stuff like that. And then I got on the BART, and I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to sleep in my own place tonight. Lo and behold, the Bay Series was happening. You guys know what the Bay Series is? If you don't, I made an app for it. So the Bay Series is when San Francisco and Oakland A's, they're in different leagues. So the only time they play, well, after 1997, the only time they would have ever played is only in the World Series. And that happened in the 80s during the San Francisco earthquake. You guys remember the history? If you don't, look it up. So the only time they would ever play was just World Series, and that hardly ever happened. Well, after 1997, they play twice a year. They don't just play twice a year. They have a series. Well, that means they have like a couple games back and forth between both stadiums, which means that the BART is basically pretty much turned, where you can't really get on the BART at a certain time, like when you want to go home. So I built Hustlin' to tell me when the BART is turned. And what it looks like, and this is actually, so I rebuild this, I've been here for 3 years. I rebuild this app every year to learn a new technology. So I started with I'll talk about what I did. I started with the Rails app that just outputs, actually I started with the Rails app that was a full Rails app that just, I log in and it told me when exactly, like if there's a baseball game today, it would just tell me baseball game today and which stadium I have to worry about. It's actually more of a problem for the Giants just because I kind of go north instead, but it's still a problem on the weekends too as well. Don't ride BART on the weekends. You make it, like, if you care about yourself, don't ride the BART on the weekends. So I just took that app. I actually rewrote it a year and a half ago to actually render JSON. So that way, this app that you see here, it's actually a React Native app. I do have a mobile client, a web client as well in React and Ember, and because I rewrite it every year. And that's what it looks like on the mobile. And that's JSON. And what I did was, once I figured out I didn't want to do Rails for that time, and I wanted to learn something new because I started in Rails, I found out about the Jamstack before I knew it was called the Jamstack. So talk about just making old things new. I separated my API and my client. So I wrote my API, I rendered the JSON, and then I could just talk straight to the client. So if it's Ember, Angular, React, I wrote all those situations. React Native, technically still a client even though it's mobile. Well, mobiles are clients. I separated it. And I was able to rewrite that app all the time. And I just had every time I would rewrite this app, I would just have the same specs that I needed to hit. So I just needed to have a JSON database. I needed to have a web scraper. I needed to have a cron job because I need to know when to send I need to know notifications, but I need to scrape the data that I have in my database. So that way at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. is when I was actually doing it. It would just let me know baseball game today on my phone. So perfect app, right? Especially if you're not really into baseball. So those were the things. And then on my client, I just had to run the JavaScript and markup. At this point, I default to React because I do it so much that it's just really easy for me to crank out a React app. What's also really easy is I can host this super simply. So when I had it in Rails, I would host it on Heroku. Super simple. It's like Heroku push deploy. Cool, I have a server. My client, hosted on Netlify. Best thing about it is that Netlify is free. If you have a developer plan, you can actually just host that $0 a month, any developers were cool, ship it. The problem is Heroku is $7 a month. Now, if you have an app that you need to have up all the time to scrape to actually do a cron job to then send a notification, Heroku actually doesn't let you have your app up on the free tier for 24 hours a day. You can only have your app up. I don't know what it is now. It used to be like 16 or 12 hours, something like that. But if I need to know when baseball is and my notifications have to happen and I happen to hit that app twice in the morning and the afternoon, then I couldn't use it until like the next day. So that's problematic. $7 a month is okay, especially if you can host a JSON API. You can do cron jobs. One of the biggest reasons why I did Heroku is because the cron jobs, it's built in. It's like a Heroku task. You just set it up at a time, and then it fires your functions or your tasks that you choose. Super awesome. Postgres Database, I know Postgres, sort of, not really, Active Record. So I threw that up there, $7 a month, fast, simple, quick, easy, simple, reliable, sort of. The problem is $7 a month when you times that by 12 is $84 a year. $84, now I don't know how much you guys get paid, but $84, no matter how much you get paid, to me, is a lot of money. Just to have a little side app to tell me when there's a baseball game. Totally cool. Actually, so these are the tickets for today. I was hoping to see like $80 for a ticket because it's the Giants and people overpay for that team. But anyway, they actually had a sale. Weird. So I could have probably brought pretty much at least these 2 rows to the baseball game today with my $84. That would have been awesome. So I pretty much killed that server. Baseball actually is more of like a 9-month out of the year sport. So technically not $84, more like 9 times 7, whatever that is. So, and also the other thing is, when you hit your database, that's fine when I'm using it. But what if all you guys use my app? How much money does that cost? I don't know. It costs a lot of money. I don't want to pay for you to use my app. You pay me to use my app. That's how it works. So let's talk about serverless. Sorry, I was trying not to be so funny. So this talk actually, the meat of the talk actually is about serverless. And I know we had an IBM talk, Loopback talk, but I know Aaron actually is from IBM and they have OpenWhisk. I do want to focus on the one tool I use, which is very similar to that, which is Lambda. And I was able to take the function of actually getting my database of my baseball games, and I didn't mention this as well. ESPN.com, it's all HTML tables, so if you want to do web scraping real easily, go to ESPN.com. It's good practice. Hopefully no one works at ESPN because I don't want that to be shut down because it's super easy to scrape your website. But I can scrape websites, I can populate it to a JSON table or a Postgres database, and then I can have 20 lines, 18 lines of code that you see up there. I won't go through the lines. And I can just fetch the data from the database. And then I can fire off a cron task. And I'll talk about that in a sec, but I'm only going to focus on AWS's Lambda and all their ecostructure. But understand that this is actually a new craze, serverless. There's actually new opportunities in this space. So there's like literally a race to the bottom as far as price goes. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So running a server equals money. It takes a lot of money. And I already have my architecture separated. So I spent a lot of time actually rewriting my front end. But I actually did not rewrite my back end very often. Actually, I still use the same original Rails API that I wrote the first year I moved here. Like literally a couple months after this problem happened, before the next base series. So it happened in March. And the second base series happened in June. So I wrote the app like between that time. And I was like, oh, cool, this works. And it told me, Oakland A's are playing the Giants. Stay home, lock your doors. And that's what I did. And it was pretty nice. So my goal was actually to spend less money and find a new technology. And remember, I rebuild this app every year, so I have pretty much the leeway to do whatever I want. So what I did is I took out my API and I rewrote it. And instead of using a Postgres database, because Rails, you just do like Rails new -- API if you're in Rails 5, and then boom, you have an API. Postgres, super easy, except it costs a lot of money. Instead, I use AWS's version of that, sort of. It's a key value store called DynamoDB. I would just populate all my JSON right into the DynamoDB, and it works. I then use API Gateway because I need JSON, so I can wrap all my DynamoDB tables into API Gateway. So I have a URL, which is like /events, is what I called it, and .json, and then I have JSON. Cool. Lambda. Lambda actually is pretty much focused on all of these options, but I'll just talk about this option for web scraping. That fetching the data can also be done as web scraping, and web scraping in Node is pretty easy. I didn't actually talk about this, but Lambda, you could write it in Node, Python, and C++, maybe? C#? Yeah, so C#, and I think they're working on other things. Amazon's really big, so maybe you can ask them when that's happening. I do know Google Cloud Functions and stuff like that also have other languages you can write in, so if you are not a JavaScript developer, I don't know why you're here, but if you don't like JavaScript that much, then there's probably another language and another tool you can use to do the same exact thing. So I wrote a function to scrape, which I won't show, which just scrapes ESPN.com. That hits another function based on that event that then populates my DynamoDB table. And then right after that, I use CloudWatch to then fire cron jobs. CloudWatch is really a monitoring tool, but you can use it to fire like a simple cron job to then check to see, based on all the data that's in there, are there any baseball games today? Pretty great, huh? Other thing, I can also send notifications as well, just fire off notification Lambda. Awesome. So I pretty much have an entire architecture that I was paying $7 a month for. I'm very concerned what it's going to cost now, especially now you guys know about it, you're probably going to be looking for this, which I will package this up eventually. I was actually very nervous before when I had the old architecture for people to use it, because I don't care about this app too much. I just like coding, so this is my problem I solved. But good news about this is that this actually is less money than $7. Like, who would have thought? What can you get for $7 in the Bay Area? 7 McChickens. You can get a baseball ticket today that is already over. Oh, by the way, the JSON data that showed was actually the game yesterday. I made the screenshots yesterday, so that's actually yesterday's game, which was against the Dodgers, if you really care. So it is less money, because what you're doing is you're actually not running a server all the time. You only use Lambda when you need it. So you're actually invoking functions, which is super awesome, because now I can invoke functions to grab my JSON data. I can invoke a function to run a cron job, get the data. Well, I guess JSON data and database is the same thing. Web scraping, notifications. I am just invoking a function, and you only pay for when you invoke the function. So if I only check this twice a day, I'm paying for it twice a day. That's it. So you're probably wondering, how much does this cost? Any guesses? 100 bucks, 10 bucks, $12? No, lower. Your first million invocations are free every month. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Do you know how many seconds are in a day? I don't know, but I know it takes 10. If I were to run this every second of the day for 10.5 days, actually 10.67 days, then I would hit 1 million. So I'd have to hit this every second of the day, and that's it. And then I would start having to pay. And it's still pretty cheap. It's actually 0.0025 cents or something like that. Something crazy, like once you hit that tier. And this is just Lambda. IBM's version, which is OpenWhisk. Azure, which, oh man, I had it on the previous slide. But Azure is also available to us. It's also pretty cheap. There's other options, like play with them, see what you can, race to the bottom. DynamoDB, 25 cents per gigabyte per month. That's okay. I mean, I'm not hosting images, I'm hosting JSON data. How big is the JSON data going to be? Not a lot. Especially when I'm only grabbing home games. I forgot to mention, I'm not grabbing the entire MLB database. I'm grabbing home games of 2 teams. So that's all I'm hosting, which is nothing. It's pretty trivial. CloudWatch, it's free if you don't have the extra features with monitoring and metrics. So I'm just firing a function using CloudWatch. They literally say, I don't think they want a calculator or something, but they literally say most use cases are free for CloudWatch. The other one I also didn't want to calculate and explain to as well. I don't know why I didn't write a title. What is this? Oh, API Gateway. Duh. That's actually the first time I saw, yesterday morning is the first time I saw the API Gateway logo, and I probably should have titled it. But API Gateway, just to get your JSON and a URL. It's hard to read, but it's like 0.0020 cents when you hit over half a gigabyte. So yeah, again, JSON's pretty small when you're only grabbing 2 MLB teams' home games. So even if you had a large data set, it's actually pretty useful to use this because it's trivial. My AWS bill at December, the last time I checked it, because I have no idea how to pay for it, is 11 cents. It was 11 cents last year. They won't take my credit card. I tried. Actually, they did take it because I got up to like 15 cents. So I think that was valid for them. So I think last month I paid 15 cents. I don't know how I'm going to eat. So all this to say, I was able to build this app, recreate it using a serverless architecture, and my problem was I wanted to pay less money, and I did it. Congratulations. I do also want to point out that if you guys are not really into AWS console, I'm not. There's actually a framework that's actually pretty useful. It's called serverless. It's a command line tool, very similar to Loopback. You just install it, and then you start serverless, install this, and then you can like do everything I just did and talked about. So serverless is actually a pretty active community. You can actually check them out on Gitter or on their serverless.com page, and they will respond to you, which is pretty great because I have a lot of questions all the time. Also, I wanted to point out real quick, also A Cloud Guru, they have two courses. One's a service architecture course, which is kind of what I covered, and the other one is a serverless framework course, which I just had on the last slide. These guys are awesome because their entire site is serverless. So their front end is actually hosted with Netlify. Yeah, they're hosted with Netlify. And they actually use DynamoDB to host all their customer data. They use Lambda functions to send off emails. Everything I explained, this company does with their website. So this entire architecture, and I'm pretty sure they're not paying too much money, but they're also pretty popular in the AWS space. They focus on AWS-specific technologies and get training and certifications and things like this, like serverless. A Cloud Guru. Cool. And then, oh, sorry, I do want to point out that these slides are available at baseball.netlify.com. Who would have thought? Speaking of which, I also want to thank Ken Burns for making an amazing documentary, 9 Innings, which is 9 episodes, and it's all about baseball in America. I was never a baseball fan. I grew up watching basketball. And, but this is really interesting, so sometimes I watch and indulge myself into a baseball game. I also want to point out today, I hosted a podcast called Jamstack Radio. Today, we have an episode that went out called Functions as a Service, which is literally what I just talked about. So if you want to get out your phone right now, I'll wait. Okay, and then if you want to subscribe to this podcast, you will get the latest episode. Also, episode 4 is specifically on serverless, the framework, too, as well. So you get like best of both worlds. Very interesting. They go over way more use cases, things like form data. If you don't have to actually run an Apache server or a PHP server to consume your forms, you can actually just use a Lambda function to then populate your DynamoDB table. So if you have like a marketing page, super easy, obviously cheap. I'm BDougie Yo on Twitter, and that is all I got. This is actually Kendrick Lamar, and he's actually in Oakland, in West Oakland, actually. So I use it all the time.